Hello, Buddy Arrow here, and welcome to a little Q&A. Got a lot of feedback from you guys in the comments, a lot of positive comments. I want to start off by saying thank you guys so much for your support and your encouragement. It really helps me. It gives me some more encouragement to make more videos like the ones I have been making recently. Obviously, the review on this laptop. If you guys want to see the gaming benchmarks for Fortnite, skip to this time right here in the video. There will be Fortnite, there will be GTA, CSGO, Rainbow Six Siege, Fortnite, Apex Legends. I think that's it. There might be one more I'm missing, but maybe not. All the games that I'll be benchmarking are listed here, and the times are also listed next to them. But yeah, so if you want to skip to this time, that's where there's going to be the 8 CPU and FPU stress along at the same time. The Heaven benchmark, we're going to be running both of those to perform a little bit of a stress test on this laptop and see what kind of thermals and clocks we get, see if it thermal throttles and whatnot. Another thing you guys wanted to see Cinebench R15. I don't know why I didn't think to do that. In this video, if you want to skip to this time, I'm going to do Cinebench R15. I'm going to do multiple runs and see what kind of scores we get with turbo mode off and turbo mode on. I'll do about 5 runs of each of those. And without further ado, let's get straight into the video. But I want to give a moment to shout out to my channel and say subscribe if you like the videos and you want more videos. That'll help encourage me as well as it supports the channel. I need to get to 1,000 subscribers before I can monetize and start making money off YouTube. I also have to make 4,000 watch hours before I can monetize. Lifetime views I already got covered. But please consider subscribing and watching more of my videos to help me get to those goals. You can also support me on my Patreon to help fund future buying future products such as this laptop or things of the sort. It would really help me create future videos and create good content for you guys. And the more experience that I have creating content, the better and better quality, at least it should be getting. I got a little thing here of things that you guys want to know about, things that I didn't quite cover in the review. This video is going to go over all those things that I missed, or at least what I've been seeing in the comments. A lot of you guys wanted more gaming benchmarks with MSI Afterburner. I know, I did it. Don't worry, that's going to come later in the video. Also later in the video, I'm going to show you how to install hard drives and SSDs, the 2.5-inch ones, and the NVMe. It's a very simple process, as well as the RAM. It's just taking off screws and whatnot, but I'll show you that when it comes time. Backlight bleed, first subject here. So the screen, people have been complaining about backlight bleed. I may not be as picky as certain people. But it is an LCD display of a pretty high refresh rate, so I wouldn't expect anything too spectacular from the screen quality of this panel. So here's the thing. I don't notice backlight bleed unless the screen is pitch black or if I'm in a really, really dark scenario in the game. But to be honest, in my opinion, it's really not that bad. But that's just my opinion. I may not be as picky as you or as other people. It's really up to interpretation. But the only backlight bleed that you're going to see is if you stand up and look at it from a really odd angle. Then you're going to see the standard LCD backlighting showing through. But that's very standard. Looking at it at full brightness, as long as it's not completely black on the screen, I don't notice backlight bleeding. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's a good display. I really enjoy it. It's high refresh rate. It's pretty good image quality. Color accuracy, that's the next subject. Color accuracy. This screen, it's a trade-off. Do you want high color accuracy, low refresh rate, or high refresh rate, low color accuracy? Generally, in laptop displays, you're not going to get best of both worlds. If you want high color accuracy, you're going to want to go with the 4K IPS 60 Hz model of this laptop instead of the 144 Hz 1080p model of this laptop, because it's going to be a trade-off. It's going to be really hard to find a 144 Hz display that has high color accuracy. As far as brightness goes, it's pretty damn bright, even in direct sunlight. Not direct sunlight, but even in out in in a bright day, as long as it's not in direct sunlight, you can generally see the laptop screen pretty well. Indoors, it's perfectly bright. It's about 300 nits, maybe a little bit brighter. I don't know the actual specifications, and I don't have any tools to detect color accuracy and brightness and things of that sort. But I'm going off what I am noticing and what specs have been said about it. So that covers those two topics. Battery life. Battery life on this thing, you shouldn't be expecting more than 3 to 4 hours on battery life on gaming laptops. Depending on what program's using, how much resources you're consuming while using it, that's going to prolong or shorten your life. If you are editing a video, you shouldn't expect more than a couple hours from full battery. Maybe 2.5. That's pushing it though, because editing software is going to eat your resources up. If you're just browsing the web and watching YouTube, or you're using Microsoft Word or whatever, you're editing stuff, very simple tasks, you can expect a little bit more battery life out of this, maybe 3 to 4 hours. And if you put it on a pretty low brightness and turn down the backlight to the lowest setting on the keyboard, you can maybe push 4 to 5 hours out of this thing, but I would not expect more than 3 to 4. But I'm sure you can achieve higher than that. So, I mean, but it's a gaming laptop. What do you really expect from this thing? For thermals, this thing stays damn cool. As you will see from the benchmarks later in this video on the video games, it stays pretty cool. The CPU likes to stay around 70 to 75. Usually around 70 on the more graphically CPU-intensive games. You're going to get up to around 75, 80, maybe even 85, depending on how intensive the game is. There's only one game that I have seen that eats up a ton of CPU, and that's Golf with Your Friends. That's on max settings, and that's while streaming. So it's going to be pretty hard to make this thing thermal throttle, but it is doable. During the stress test, it did thermal throttle down to about 3 gigahertz. 3.1 to 3.2 gigahertz is actually what it throttled down to. But that's when you're pushing it. That was using Ada64 plus Heaven, and that's obviously not practical. That's just a stress test. The GPU, with it in turbo mode, it never got over 65, period. During most games, it's going to stay around 55, 60. That's as much as it's going to get to. And you might get to 65, 67 if you're using a game that's using all of your GPU, 100% utilization. As far as the laptop temperature goes, your wrist rest, your touchpad, the WASD keys, the numpad, all of that is going to stay really cool, especially in turbo mode. Might get a little bit warmer if you don't have the laptop in turbo mode, but if you're gaming, you're probably going to have it on anyways. But the only part of this laptop that gets hot, I would say, the keyboard gets a little warm from about the right side of the spacebar all the way to the edge of the numpad. There's a little hot spot there. It will get a little bit toasty during your more intensive games. And then obviously the metal bar above this keyboard right here, gets pretty toasty during benchmarking and very intensive games. It does get pretty hot, even with turbo mode on. There's no fans cooling this part of the laptop up here. And in fact, that's right, above the heat sinks where it's blowing out all the hot air. Other than that, this laptop stays damn cool, in my opinion. It's one of the better cool laptops on the market right now. I don't know how it compares to MSI's cooling. I don't have an MSI laptop. I don't know how their cooling is, but in my opinion, it's pretty good cooling. Okay, so the turbo button. Some people have been saying the turbo button overclocks the entire system. Here's what I have to say about this, or say about that. In my opinion, you can't overclock storage. You can't overclock SSDs. You can't overclock hard drives. I may be wrong on that, but I am about 95% sure you cannot overclock storage. Unless Acer is underclocking the storage just to boost it up in turbo mode to improve marketing schemes. I doubt they are, but it could be possible. That is a possibility, but I doubt they're doing that. When it comes to RAM, it could be overclocking the RAM, but at the same time, there wasn't that much performance increase from the RAM. It was sitting in its standard 2400 megahertz. The CPU, Acer can't overclock the CPU, even if they wanted to. Intel has locked out this processor. It's not a K. There's no K at the end of the processor. So even if Intel or even if Acer wanted to, they couldn't overclock this because it's an H model. It's a high speed. You can't overclock it. So even if Acer wanted to, they couldn't use that turbo button to overclock. They could increase the TDP, therefore maybe getting a little bit higher speeds, but at the same time, the processor is only going to go as fast as it is designed to, which is 4 megahertz, and it hits that with turbo mode on. With turbo mode off, it still hits that 4 gigahertz speed, not 4.5, my bad. But yeah, so as far as that goes, the only thing it's really overclocking is the GPU, but somehow it's boosting the performance of everything. Alright guys, I don't know if I've missed anything else, but those are the questions that I was seeing most prominently popping up in the comments section. If you have any more comments about this laptop, or any questions, sorry. If you have any questions or comments about this video, go ahead and pop them down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's get straight into the gaming benchmarks, and then after that, Cinebench and the Ada 64 Plus Heaven benchmarks. For CSGO on low settings, the GPU never seemed to break 53 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never seemed to break 70 degrees Celsius. The GPU utilization never seemed to break 45%, and the CPU never seemed to break 35%. A fairly light game. I also never saw the CPU thermal throttle during all of this. CSGO's average frame rate on low settings was around 178 FPS, and the minimum frame rate was 132, with the maximum being 245.1. With CSGO on medium settings, the GPU never seemed to break 55 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never seemed to break 71 degrees Celsius. The maximum utilization for the GPU was 55%, and the CPU was 36%. I also noticed no thermal throttling on this test as well. The average frame rate is 188.1, the minimum frame rate was 117.9, and the maximum frame rate was 254.8. And finally, with CSGO on max settings, the GPU never seemed to break around 56 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never seemed to break around 71 degrees Celsius. Although I did see one spike up to 77 degrees Celsius, that doesn't really mean much because it was just one spike. For the GPU, I never saw the utilization break 60%, and the CPU never broke around 33%. I also noticed no thermal throttling on these tests as well. The average frame rate was 155.8 FPS, the minimum frame rate is 104.4, and the maximum was 213.4. With GTA 5 on normal settings, the GPU never seemed to break 61 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never seemed to break 79 degrees Celsius. The GPU max utilization was 79%, and the CPU max utilization was 55%. The average frame rate was 142.5, the minimum frame rate was 76.9, and the maximum frame rate was 269.9. With GTA 5 on high settings, the GPU never seemed to break 62 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never seemed to break 81 degrees Celsius. The max utilization was 93 on the GPU, and the max utilization on the CPU was 48%. The average frame rate was 131.2, the minimum frame rate was 71.2, and the maximum frame rate was 269.9. With GTA 5 on max settings, the CPU never seemed to break around 83 degrees Celsius, and the GPU never seemed to break around 63 degrees Celsius. The GPU max utilization was 97%, and the CPU max utilization was 38%. The average frame rate was 114.4, the minimum frame rate was 59.2, and the maximum frame rate was 269.8. For Black Ops 4 on medium settings, the render resolution was set to 125. The GPU never got over 64 degrees Celsius, and the CPU was at its thermal throttle limit of 85 degrees Celsius, unfortunately. It throttled down to about 3.6 gigahertz, but I never saw it go below that. The CPU utilization was at about 77%, and the GPU utilization was basically 100% the entire time. Unfortunately, I lost the footage for the Black Ops high settings, but at the Black Ops 4 max settings, the GPU never got over 64 degrees, the CPU never got over 85 degrees, and the GPU was at 100% utilization, and the CPU was at about 79% utilization. The CPU throttled to around 3.5 gigahertz, but I didn't see it go below that. So, based on the medium settings and the max settings, we can guesstimate that the high settings would be about the same as both of them, but maybe a little bit less CPU usage than the max settings. For Fortnite on low settings, the GPU never got over 52 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never got over 69 degrees Celsius. The GPU never got over 50% utilization, and the CPU never got over 45% utilization. The average frame rate was 231.9, the minimum frame rate was 116.6, and the maximum frame rate was 326.3. For Fortnite on medium settings, the max temperature on the GPU was 61 degrees Celsius, the max temperature on the CPU was 80 degrees Celsius. The GPU never got over 60% utilization, and the CPU never got over 45% utilization. The average frame rate was 224.9, the minimum frame rate was 151.5, and the maximum frame rate was 304.5. For Fortnite on high settings, the GPU never got over 66 degrees Celsius, the CPU never got over 80 degrees Celsius, the GPU never got over 80% utilization, and the CPU never got over 42% utilization. The average frame rate was 183.2, the minimum frame rate was 124.9, and the maximum frame rate was 180.9. For Fortnite at Epic settings, my footage corrupted, but I do know that it never throttled and the CPU never got over 80 degrees Celsius, as well as the GPU never got over 65 degrees Celsius. The average frame rate in Fortnite on Epic settings was 172.1, the minimum frame rate was 110.1, and the maximum frame rate was 215.7. Once again, I am sorry, I accidentally forgot to record the Rainbow Six Siege benchmark. I recorded an earlier version, but there was a problem with the settings and I had to re-record. So the videos aren't going to match the stats and I don't have temperatures or utilization. However, I do know that it didn't thermal throttle during any of these tests when I reran it, but I do have the FPSs. For Rainbow Six Siege on high, the average frame rate was 166.9, the minimum frame rate was 144.9, and the maximum frame rate was 190.5. For Rainbow Six Siege on very high, the average frame rate was 161.4, the minimum frame rate was 137.7, and the maximum frame rate was 183.3. The average frame rate for Rainbow Six Siege on Ultra settings was 156.0, the minimum frame rate was 134.9, and the maximum frame rate was 174.9. The average frame rate in Rainbow Six Siege on Max settings was 65.7 FPS, the minimum frame rate was 158.0, and the maximum frame rate was 120.8. With Apex Legends on medium to low settings, I was getting an average frame rate of 112 FPS, a minimum frame rate of 66.3 FPS, and a maximum frame rate of 144 FPS. With Apex Legends on medium to high settings, I got an average frame rate of 112 FPS, a minimum frame rate of 69 FPS, and a maximum frame rate of 144 FPS. Both the medium to high and medium to low settings both got about the same average FPS, and the same minimum and same maximum. I'm not really sure why, but I guess it doesn't really matter whether you have it on medium high to medium low. You're still going to get about the same FPS. With Apex Legends on max settings, I was getting an average frame rate of 103.8 FPS, a minimum frame rate of 59.5 FPS, and a maximum frame rate of 144 FPS. In the Ada 64 Plus Heaven stress test, we started out at a whopping 80 watts. But then it later decided to level out at about 55 watts since it started to thermal throttle. It thermal throttled down to about 3.1 to 3.2, but this is during very impractical situations. You're never going to have your CPU and GPU at a full load unless you're doing some insane game. Both the CPU and GPU were maxed out. The GPU never got above 64 degrees Celsius, and the CPU never got above 85 degrees Celsius, but that's partially because it decided to start thermal throttling at that limit. I hope that Acer in the future decides to give an option to update the BIOS and change that thermal limit from 85 to about 90 or 95. For Cinebench, I ran it 5 times without turbo mode on and 5 times with the turbo mode on, at least for the CPU test, and I got these scores for the times that it wasn't in turbo mode, so that averages out to this amount. Running the CPU Cinebench benchmark with turbo mode on, I ran it 5 times and got these scores and an average of this score. After that, I decided to run the Cinebench R15 OpenCL test. I ran it 2 times with turbo and 2 times without. For the 2 times that I ran it without turbo, I got these scores, which averages out to this score. For the times that turbo were on, I got these 2 scores, and then those averaged out to this score. Anyways, guys, thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting me on my Patreon, as it allows me to buy products like this and make videos like this. So if you like this video, please consider donating to my Patreon. Also, please like and subscribe. It really helps me be a little bit more confident, and it makes me really proud to know that my YouTube channel is doing good. Also, if you have any more questions or comments about this product, please put it in the comments down below. I'll try and answer or respond to them as fast as possible. But the only thing I'll be doing from this point on about this product is live streams, since I've made plenty of videos on this product. So go ahead and watch those other videos if you still have questions, and if you still don't have them answered, put them in the comments of this video. But without letting this video run for too long, this is Arrow, and see y'all in the next video. Peace.